So a few years... Imagine looking out the windshield as you drive down this chaotic, multi-lane city highway at dusk.
Oh yeah, just brake lights everywhere?
Exactly, brake lights everywhere, and you glance up, and looming over the traffic is this colossal digital billboard.
The really bright ones that almost blind you.
Yes. Or, I mean, let's shrink that scale down a bit. Imagine you've just downloaded a brand new app to manage your small business finances.
Right. Something you already don't really want to be doing.
Exactly. So you open it for the very first time, and you're staring down at your phone screen, just waiting for the dashboard to load.
Then it just hits you.
It totally hits you. In both of those scenarios, you know, whether it's 50 feet of LED lights or 6 inches of glass in your palm, you are hit with this instant, visceral wave of sheer overwhelm.
Oh, absolutely.
Your eyes just dart frantically. There's like a neon red button in the top corner.
A dense block of tiny gray text sitting right in the middle.
Right, and a massive, hyper-detailed photograph just bleeding off the side. You literally feel an immediate spike in your heart rate.
It's stressful.
It is. You feel confused, undeniably frustrated, and within, a matter of seconds, you just look away from the billboard, or you force close the app entirely.
Yeah, you just tap out.
And now, why does that happen? We tend to blame ourselves, you know. We think, oh, I'm just tired, or I'm not tech savvy enough to understand this interface.
It's just such a shame because that is almost never the truth.
Right. That feeling of cognitive panic happens because the designer of that billboard or the architect of that app completely failed to do their most fundamental job.
It is.
They failed to guide your eye.
That is the absolute perfect way to frame the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, that overwhelming feeling of visual chaos. It isn't a failure of the user's intelligence. It is the direct result of a designer basically abdicating their responsibility to lead you through an experience.
They just gave up.
Exactly. They basically dumped 1,000 puzzle pieces onto a table and told your brain, figure out the picture on your own.
Good luck. Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are going on a mission to decode the invisible hand that guides our attention every single day.
It's going to be a fun one.
We are exploring the hidden mechanics of visual control, and we're using Chapter 8 of Graphic Design for Dummies as our foundation.
Specifically, the principles of movement, hierarchy, alignment, and space.
Right. And I want to lay our cards on the table right at the start here. Whether you are a novice designer trying to figure out, why your layout feels cluttered.
Or you're a professional who just has to build a persuasive slide deck for a Monday morning board meeting.
Exactly. Or even if you simply want to understand how the visual world around you is secretly manipulating your attention, this deep dive is for you.
Because the principles we are unpacking today aren't just like software tricks. They are the literal building blocks of human visual communication.
They really are.
They dictate how we process information on a biological and psychological level.
Yes, and before we pull back the curtain on how designers basically hijack our brains, I want to take a very quick second to ask you, the listener, to support the channel.
It's so important.
It really is. If you value this kind of content, if you want us to keep creating these highly detailed deep dives into the mechanics of the systems that run our world, your support is literally what makes it possible.
We rely on viewer and listener support to keep funding the research.
Exactly, and the time it takes to dissect these topics. So if you want more of this, please consider supporting the channel.
All right, let's set the parameters for our exploration today.
Let's do it.
When we look at the overarching philosophy of this source material, what is the ultimate goal of mastering movement, hierarchy, alignment, and space?
Well, the ultimate goal is total, uncompromising control.
Total control. That sounds a little sinister.
It does, right?
Yeah.
But the author makes this incredibly clear. These 4 principles do not exist simply to make a poster or an app look pretty or, aesthetically pleasing.
Right, it's not just decoration. Not at all. They exist to give the designer complete authority over how a viewer's eyes travel through a composition.
Wow.
When a designer successfully wields these tools, they are dictating the exact order in which you consume their information.
For driving the car.
Exactly. They are dictating the pace and speed at which you read it. They are orchestrating the overall emotional flow of the message. Like you said, they are not decorators, they are choreographers of your visual experience.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the very first tool in that choreographer's toolkit, which is movement.
A huge one.
Now, I have to admit, when I hear the word movement in the context of a screen, my brain immediately goes to animation.
Sure, most people's do.
Right. I think of a video playing or a GIF looping or like a website menu that physically slides out from the side of my browser.
Which is a very common misconception.
Yeah.
But in the context of foundational graphic design, we are specifically talking about static design.
Okay.
Like a magazine page, a printed poster, or a static landing page.
So how do you have movement when nothing is actually moving?
It's an illusion.
I mean, it's about creating an invisible pathway for the viewer's eyes. I like to think of it like being a highly skilled, incredibly subtle tour guide in a museum.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Yeah, because a terrible tour guide physically grabs you by the shoulders and like shoves you from a Renaissance painting to a modern sculpture.
Right, just manhandling you.
Exactly. But a brilliant tour guide never touches you. They stand in a specific spot in the room, they use their posture, they gesture with their hands.
You lay the lighting of the room.
Yes, creating this natural, irresistible flow. You end up walking through the exhibits in the exact order that tells the most compelling historical story, and you think it was your idea to walk that way.
What's fascinating here is the underlying psychology behind why that invisible tour guide is so biologically necessary for us.
Why do we need it so badly?
Well, a composition with absolutely no design movement appears uninteresting, lifeless, and static. But if we dig into the why, it's because the human eye and the human brain desperately crave direction.
We want to be told where to go.
Evolutionarily speaking, yes. From an evolutionary standpoint, we are hardwired to look for pathways, patterns, and threats.
Right, survival instincts.
Exactly. When you look at a static image that lacks structure, your brain immediately goes into this low-level overdrive, trying to figure out, where do I start?
What is the most critical piece of information here?
Yes. Movement adds life and energy because it resolves that tension. It engages the viewer by giving them a clear, safe path to follow.
I hear what you're saying, but let me play devil's advocate for a second here.
Go for it.
Let's say I'm putting together a highly technical, incredibly dry financial report for my corporate job.
Okay, lots of spreadsheets.
Just charts and text. If I start trying to add movement to a spreadsheet layout, isn't that just going to make it look messy and unprofessional?
I can see why you'd think that.
Doesn't a dry document need to be entirely static to be taken seriously?
That is a brilliant pushback,
Yeah.
but it assumes that movement means adding swooping lines and chaotic arrows everywhere.
Right, like a treasure map.
Exactly, and that's not it at all. Even in a dry financial report, if you don't design a pathway for the eye, if you just dump a block of text next to a pie chart without considering how the eye gets from one to the other,
You're in trouble.
you are actively punishing your reader.
How so? Like, what actually happens to them?
Because without a pathway, the reader's eyes bounce around randomly. We call it saccadic movement.
Saccadic movement.
Right, and random, unguided saccades require immense cognitive effort. It might seem like a trivial thing, but when your brain has to constantly pause and ask, should I look at this column of numbers first?
Or should I read the legend on the chart?
Or should I look at the bold title? When you do that, you experience micro levels of cognitive fatigue.
Oh, wow.
And over the course of a 10-page report, that fatigue compounds. And the immediate biological result of cognitive fatigue is disengagement.
You just stop looking.
You close the app. You look away from the billboard.
You just give up, completely exhausted by the sheer effort of looking at the thing.
Precisely. The invisible pathway of movement prevents cognitive fatigue by doing the heavy lifting for the reader's brain.
So that brings us to the actual physical mechanics of how a designer pulls off this invisible tour guide routine. We are transitioning from the broad philosophy of movement into the specific tactical execution.
The nuts and bolts.
Right. This is what the book refers to as directional movement, and the tools are things like lines, shapes, color, gradients, shading, and contrast.
Yes, these are the physical levers a designer pulls to steer your retina.
Let's focus on just one of those levers for a second because the underlying mechanism is wild to me. Take color.
Oh, color's a huge one.
Right. If you have a predominantly cool blue-toned app interface and you place a single, highly saturated, warm orange button in the bottom right corner,
Ooh.
you aren't just making a stylistic choice, you are utilizing directional movement. Warm colors visually advance toward the eye, while cool colors recede into the background.
They literally pull forward.
Your retina is physically pulled toward that orange contrast. But the source material gives us an even more visceral, specific example of directional movement in action.
Yes, the experiment.
It's an exercise called the pick a number experiment. Let me set the scene for you listening. Imagine a photograph. In the center of the frame is a person, looking directly at the camera.
Okay.
They're holding up a plain white piece of cardboard. Printed in stark black text on the cardboard are the words PC, K, a number.
Pretty straightforward so far.
And beneath those words, spaced out perfectly evenly across the card, are the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, if that were the whole image, your eye would probably just read it left to right.
1, 2, 3, 4. Naturally.
But here's the manipulation. The person in the photograph is holding the card from the bottom edge. Their hand is positioned specifically on the right side of the card, and their thumb is resting directly underneath the number 3.
Oh, that's sneaky.
The angle of their forearm, the position of their hand, and the tip of their thumb are all creating implied lines pointing directly, unequivocally, at the number 3.
This is one of the most compelling demonstrations of implied directional lines I've ever seen. And the assertion here is that if you were to just casually glance at that photograph and instantly pick a number,
You're picking 3.
there is a statistically overwhelming probability that your brain will select the number 3.
Which honestly feels a little bit like a Jedi mind trick. It feels manipulative.
It does feel that way. But what's fascinating here is the absolute undeniable power of implied lines and human conditioning.
Yeah.
We just discussed how desperate the brain is for direction. From the time we are infants, we are socially and biologically conditioned to follow gestures.
If someone points, you look.
Exactly. If someone points their finger across a crowded room, you don't stare at the tip of their finger. Your gaze instantly traces the invisible line shooting out from their hand to see what they're pointing at.
Right, it's automatic.
The designer in this experiment is hijacking that deeply ingrained psychological reflex. The physical gesture of the hand in the photograph acts as a massive visual cue. It's a directional arrow disguised as human anatomy.
That is so clever. Your eye naturally travels down the slope of the arm, hits the hand, slides up the thumb, and boom, your focal point lands squarely on the 3.
Yes.
I see the mechanics of it, but I want to interject a layer of friction here. I want to clarify something for you listening, because it's easy to hear this and think graphic designers are basically practicing dark magic.
They aren't sorcerers.
Exactly. The text explicitly cautions against viewing this as hypnosis or subliminal mind control. You cannot force a user to make a choice they actively, consciously despise.
That's a crucial distinction.
If I owe you $4 and you hold up a card with 1, 2, 3, 4 on it and subliminally point your thumb at the 3, I'm not going to suddenly forget my debt and hand you $3.
I mean, I wish you would, but no.
Right. Logic and established intent will override the visual trick.
Exactly. It does not overwrite human free will or deep-seated preferences.
But what you can do, and what directional movement masters, is stacking the deck.
Stacking the deck, yes.
If the viewer is completely neutral, if they're just casually scrolling or quickly scanning a dashboard without a rigid agenda.
You can architect the visual environment.
Exactly, so that their attention naturally, effortlessly flows exactly where you want it to pool. You aren't forcing them to look at the number 3, you are simply lowering the friction of looking at the number 3 to absolute 0.
Creating the path of least resistance. That is the perfect analogy. And that path of least resistance extends far beyond literal pointing thumbs.
What else does it cover?
Gradients, for instance. They do the exact same thing on a subconscious level.
Really, just a color fade.
Yeah. A subtle gradient that fades from a dark charcoal gray on the left to a brilliant white on the right creates an irresistible sense of directional movement toward the light.
Like a moth to a flame.
Precisely. Human eyes are drawn to luminosity. You are using the gradient as a gentle, invisible slope, sliding the viewer's attention toward the brighter area where you've conveniently placed your most important text.
Okay, so if directional movement, like the thumb, the color contrast, the gradient, is essentially a single powerful arrow pointing the way,
Single signpost, yeah.
what happens when the journey gets complicated? What happens when a designer needs to guide a viewer through a dense, multi-layered experience?
Then we need a whole system.
This brings us to the concepts of repetition movement and sequential movement. Let's break down repetition first.
Repetition movement is fundamentally about visual rhythm. It's about taking a specific element, like a color, a geometric shape, a specific line thickness, or even a texture,
Okay.
and repeating it strategically throughout a design to create a predictable rhythmic flow. Think of it like a visual drumbeat.
I love that, a visual drumbeat. But how does repeating something actually cause the eye to move? I feel like it would just sit there.
Because the brain is an extraordinary pattern recognition machine. When you repeat a visual element, the viewer's brain recognizes and internalizes that pattern within milliseconds.
Oh, wow. Milliseconds.
Yes. And once the brain learns the pattern, it subconsciously expects that pattern to continue. It actively begins hunting for the next instance of it.
It's looking for the next hit.
Exactly. So, if you have a complex infographic and every major data point is highlighted with a specific shade of teal,
The viewer's eye will automatically start hopping from teal dot to teal dot across the page.
the repetition creates a series of stepping stones.
It makes me think of a pinball machine. When you look at the playfield of a pinball machine, it is utter chaos. Flashing lights, ramps, bumpers.
It's a sensory overload.
It totally is.
Yep.
But a great pinball designer uses repetition, matching colored lights or identical bumper shapes, to subconsciously show the player the intended path for the ball.
That's a great example.
The repetition movement in UI design does the exact same thing for the eye. In a complex software dashboard, if every action button like save, submit, next is a rounded pill shape with a purple outline.
Your brain stops reading the text after the second time.
Exactly. It just scans the chaotic screen for the purple pill shapes.
That is exactly how it works. You are training the user's eye in real time. But then we have sequential movement, which is a slightly different beast.
How so?
Sequential movement isn't just about finding the next similar object, it's about a strictly controlled, highly logical flow of steps. A implies B, which leads to C.
Let's use a deeply familiar example for this. Think about how you read a comic book.
Oh, comic books are the ultimate test of this.
A single page of a comic book is an incredibly dense, chaotic piece of visual information. There are dozens of intricate drawings, overlapping speech bubbles, explosive sound effects, varying panel sizes. To a computer, it's a mess.
Complete visual noise.
But as a human, you rarely, if ever, read the panels out of order. Why is that?
Because the comic book artist is an absolute master of sequential movement.
Exactly. The artist physically engineers the composition to ensure you can't get lost. They will draw a character in the first panel, and that character's arm will be physically outstretched, pointing diagonally down toward the start of the next panel. The tail of a speech bubble in panel 2 will curve deliberately to point your eye toward the face of the character speaking in panel 3.
It's so seamless you don't even notice.
They use the invisible sight lines of the characters themselves. Like, if Superman is looking up and to the right, your eye instinctively follows his gaze to the next frame. The artist is placing a series of invisible sequential bumpers to bounce your attention through the narrative in the precise order that makes the joke land, or makes the reveal shocking.
And this isn't just for comic books. If we connect this to the bigger picture of corporate or informational design, sequential movement is what keeps a multi-step instructional graphic from becoming a nightmare.
Oh, like IKEA furniture instructions.
Exactly. If you are designing a poster explaining how to assemble a piece of furniture, you rely entirely on sequential movement. You use literal arrows, numbered circles, and spatial progression, usually left to right, top to bottom.
Right, to ensure the user doesn't attach the table legs before they build the frame.
The sequential layout is the invisible hand holding theirs through the process.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. We've talked extensively about organizing multiple elements to create pathways. We've talked about laying out the stepping stones.
Right.
But what about creating a dynamic sense of action, depth, and energy within one single confined image? This transitions us to the concepts of overlap movement and implied movement.
These are the techniques that elevate a design from feeling flat and technical to feeling alive and immersive.
Let's start with overlap movement. The source material describes a fascinating technique using an illustration of a baseball game.
I love this example.
Imagine a drawing of a baseball batter winding up for a massive swing, positioned right next to an outfielder leaping up, stretching their glove high into the air.
Okay, classic sports action shot.
Now, the key to this technique isn't just the drawing itself, but how the drawing interacts with the frame containing it.
The border?
Right. The batter is enclosed in a simple, thin black square border, like a standard picture frame. But the artist has drawn the batter so that his hands and the wooden barrel of the baseball bat physically break out of that black line.
Punch right through it.
The bat overlaps the border, extending into the blank white space of the page. The outfielder's leather glove does the exact same thing, breaking out through the top line of the frame.
This is such a profoundly effective technique for manipulating perception. By placing elements so they partially cover the border, by basically violating the design boundary of the frame, the designer immediately, forcefully creates the illusion of depth.
It pops.
Yes. They are creating a z-axis on a flat 2D plane
It makes it feel three-dimensional.
because it establishes a spatial hierarchy. Our brains understand overlap in the real world perfectly. If a tree's blocking your view of a house, your brain knows the tree is closer to you than the house is.
Right, obviously.
So in the illustration, the black frame becomes the background. The body of the baseball player is the middle ground, and the bat, because it overlaps the frame, is violently pushed into the foreground. It's practically swinging out toward the viewer's face.
It breaks the fourth wall of the design.
Yes, and in doing so, it emphasizes the action. It primes the viewer's nervous system for the physical impact that is about to take place in the narrative of the drawing. It creates a tension that makes the static image feel like vibrating with potential energy.
And speaking of making static images vibrate, that brings us to implied movement.
A very cool concept.
This is the visual suggestion or illusion of motion where absolutely none exists. The text references illustrations of a running man and a dancing woman. They are just frozen ink on a page.
Just lines.
Yet when we look at them, our brains register high speed and rhythmic motion. How exactly are designers hacking our perception to make us see speed?
Well, they rely on established visual cues that our brains associate with motion blur and temporal displacement.
Temporal displacement.
Just a fancy way of showing the passage of time in a single frame. For the running man, a designer might use horizontal speed lines trailing behind his form, indicating direction and velocity from left to right.
Like in anime.
Exactly.
Neat.
For the dancing woman, they might use swooping, cyclical, overlapping strokes around her body to indicate a rhythmic, spinning, continuous motion.
That makes sense.
But it's not just comic book action lines. Designers use opacity, blurring, extreme scale, and dynamic positioning. A photograph of a race car where the car is razor sharp but the background is heavily horizontally blurred forces the brain to interpret high velocity.
But I want to push back here on the application of this. I understand how to make something look fast, but why does a graphic designer building a website or a marketing flyer care about implied movement?
Why bother?
Yeah, isn't that just a stylistic flourish to make things look cool?
I would argue it is far more strategic than just looking cool. Implied movement establishes psychological urgency. It commands attention in a visceral way that perfectly balanced, rigid, static elements simply cannot. It is about enhancing and matching the core narrative of the message.
Give me an example of how that narrative matching works, like in the real world.
Okay, imagine you are designing a digital advertisement for an extreme 24-hour flash sale for an athletic brand.
Okay, high stakes.
If you design that ad using perfectly symmetrical, centered static text blocks, sitting calmly in the middle of a vast, quiet background, your visual design is actively fighting your written message.
How so?
The text says, hurry and soon. But the visual language says, relax, take your time, we are at peace.
Ah, cognitive dissonance. That's terrible for marketing.
Exactly. But if you use implied movement, if the text is heavily italicized and angled diagonally, if the edges of the product photo are slightly blurred, if the graphic elements overlap aggressively and break out of their frames,
It feels chaotic in a good way.
that visual speed communicates the narrative of the flash sale perfectly. The visual urgency matches the textual urgency. The design itself feels like time is running out.
That is a brilliant insight. The visual style cannot betray the narrative intent.
Never.
So, we've spent all this time discussing movement, which is ultimately about how you travel through a design. But that naturally forces a transition.
Right into the next principle.
Movement gets the eye to a destination. But how does the eye know what's actually important once it arrives? This brings us to the second major principle, hierarchy.
Hierarchy is the architecture of importance. It is how we organize, prioritize, and structure information so the brain can digest it efficiently.
And before we get into the mechanics of it, I want to highlight a massive warning the author delivers in the source text.
Oh, the warning.
It's probably the most relatable, painfully honest part of the whole chapter for anyone who has ever tried to put together a presentation. The author explicitly states that mastering hierarchy is the primary component that separates a professional design solution from an amateur mess.
It's the ultimate test.
They note that when they critique college design students, almost the entirety of the critique is spent just trying to fix muddled hierarchy. It is the #1 trap for novices.
It really is. It is the dividing line between someone who just knows which buttons to click in Photoshop and someone who actually understands visual communication.
Right.
If your hierarchy is unclear, your audience has to work to understand what you're trying to say. And as we established earlier, audiences hate working.
We want it to be easy.
Good hierarchy drastically improves comprehension speed.
So how do we build this architecture of importance? We start with a foundational concept called visual weight.
Visual weight.
Now, visual weight refers to the perceived importance or dominance of a specific element on a page. It's a measurement of how much visual gravity an object has, how aggressively it pulls the eye compared to everything surrounding it.
And the most important word in that definition is perceived. Visual weight is not a physical measurement, it is an optical illusion.
Let's break down how that illusion works. Imagine a layout with a row of 6 squares.
Okay, 6 squares.
Mathematically, geometrically, drawn by a computer, every single square is the exact same size. Let's say 1 inch by 1 inch.
Perfect clones of each other.
But a designer can manipulate those identical squares so that the ones on the left feel vastly more significant, heavily anchored, and heavier than the squares on the right.
How?
By changing the line weight, giving the left squares a thick, aggressive 10-point black border, while the right squares get a whisper-thin 1-point gray border.
Or by changing transparency.
Exactly, making the left squares solid, opaque black, and the right squares 10% translucent gray. By manipulating focus, keeping the left squares razor sharp and blurring the edges of the right squares.
Even though every square occupies the exact same amount of literal real estate on the screen, your retina is biologically drawn to the thick, solid, high-contrast shapes first.
They demand more attention.
They have more visual weight.
Let's do a real-world test for you listening right now. If you're holding your smartphone or if you can see your computer desktop, just unlock it and look at the home screen.
Just take a quick glance.
Notice which icons, which widgets, or which text blocks feel heavier to your eye. Maybe your email app has a bright red notification badge with the number 42 in it.
That stresses me out just thinking about it.
Same. But think about it. That tiny red circle is physically the smallest element on your screen, yet it holds exponentially more visual weight than the large, soft blue calendar widget sitting right next to it.
It demands your attention first.
The designer engineered the operating system that way to create a hierarchy of urgency. They know human biology prioritizes high-contrast, warm colors because, evolutionarily, those signaled either ripe fruit or a dangerous threat.
And that concept of visual weight leads us directly into what I consider the most profound, counterintuitive, and challenging lesson in this entire exploration: size hierarchy.
Yes, this is the part of the methodology that genuinely blows my mind.
It's wild.
On the surface, size hierarchy seems incredibly obvious, almost insultingly simple. The bigger you make something, the more likely it is to get noticed.
Right, common sense.
You want the headline to be read first. Make the font 72 point and make the body copy 12 point. Simple enough. But then we hit the paradox of the shapes.
This is the great illusion of graphic design, the conflict between mathematics and human perception.
Let me set up this visual puzzle for you. Imagine a layout where you need to place a perfect circle next to a perfect equilateral upside-down triangle.
Okay.
You want both shapes to hold the exact same hierarchical importance. You want them to feel equally balanced.
Side by side.
If you use your design software to make that circle and that triangle mathematically the exact same height, let's say they're both exactly 2 inches tall from top to bottom, you are going to have a major problem.
A huge problem.
When you step back and look at them, the circle will actually look noticeably smaller and weaker than the triangle.
People look entirely unbalanced.
In order to make the circle look like it's the same size as the triangle, the designer has to go into the software and make the circle mathematically larger.
To cheat the math.
They have to stretch its dimensions so it is physically taller and wider than the triangle.
And this is where the source material drops a philosophical bomb. It explicitly states that design elements must be adjusted by how they are perceived, rather than by mathematics alone.
Wow.
Values and sizes that are technically mathematically correct can be completely perceptually wrong.
Okay, wait. I have to stop and push back on this heavily because to a logical brain, this feels like absolute anarchy.
I get it, I really do.
We are using precision software. We have pixel grids, exact point measurements, snap to guides. Shouldn't graphic design be a precise mathematical science?
You'd think so.
Why on earth are we abandoning strict, verifiable mathematics to rely on gut feelings about whether a circle looks a little bit puny next to a triangle?
I completely understand the frustration, but it comes down to a fundamental reality. We are designing for imperfect, highly subjective human eyes and human brains.
Not machines.
Exactly. We are not designing for rulers, and we are not designing for calculators. This is a core truth of human optical perception. Let's look at the geometry of those shapes.
Okay, let's look at them.
A triangle has sharp, outward-pointing corners. Those points actively draw the human eye outward, pulling your gaze into the negative space surrounding the shape, which makes a triangle feel expansive, aggressive, and massive.
It pushes out.
Yes. A circle, however, has a continuous enclosing curve. That curve naturally traps the human eye, pulling your gaze inward toward its own center, consolidating its mass and making it feel compact and contained.
So the physical properties of the shapes dictate how our brains process their volume.
Exactly. If you adhere strictly to the mathematical measurements, the visual weight will be radically imbalanced. The expansive nature of the triangle will completely overpower the contained nature of the circle.
Even if the ruler says they're identical.
Yes. It will be technically correct, but to the human viewing it, it will feel wrong.
This is a massive paradigm shift. You are saying the designer has to actively lie to the math in order to tell the truth to the eye.
That is a beautiful way to phrase it. Yes. The author is urging designers to cultivate and trust their critical eye over the data on the screen.
Trust your eyes, not the numbers.
You have to design for how something will be perceived, not how it's measured. This is the precise intersection where the rigid science of software meets the fluid art of human psychology.
It's poetry, honestly.
If you want two inherently different shapes, or two different fonts, or two different photographs to hold the exact same hierarchical importance in your layout, you cannot rely on the grid. You have to manually manipulate their physical size to equalize their perceived visual weight.
That is incredible. Okay, so if manipulating visual weight or physical size doesn't solve your hierarchy problem, maybe you are constrained by a brand guideline that says all logos must be the same mathematical size. Where do you turn next?
You move from the size of the object to the geography of the page.
You utilize position hierarchy.
Geography is destiny in design. Where you physically place an element fundamentally alters its perceived importance.
The most famous example of this is a phrase I think almost everyone has heard thrown around in boardrooms or marketing meetings, but maybe doesn't fully understand the origin of.
Above the fold.
Above the fold. The author provides the historical context for this, and it's a perfect example of physical constraints driving psychological habits.
Yes, the phrase originates from the golden age of the newspaper industry.
Yeah.
Broadside newspapers were massive, so to display them efficiently, they were literally folded in half horizontally and stacked inside coin-operated metal street boxes.
I remember those boxes.
Right. This created a brutal physical limitation. A customer walking down the sidewalk could only see the top half of the front page through the little glass window of the box.
Therefore, if you were an editor and you wanted to sell papers, your absolute most important, earth-shattering, attention-grabbing headline and photograph had to be geographically placed on that top half of the page.
It had to be above the fold.
Anything below the fold practically didn't exist until the purchase was made.
And what's fascinating is how that direct physical industrial limitation translated seamlessly into modern digital web design.
How so?
Above the fold on a website refers to the digital real estate you see on your monitor or phone screen the second the page loads, before you have to scroll down even a millimeter.
Right, before your thumb even moves.
That space is prime, invaluable real estate. You place your most critical hierarchical element there, your primary call to action, your main value proposition, because it requires zero physical or cognitive effort from the user to see it.
I see what you're saying, but let's interrogate this a bit.
Sure.
In the era of TikTok, Instagram, and infinite scrolling, does above the fold really matter anymore? We are conditioned to scroll constantly. Our thumbs start swiping upward before the page even finishes loading.
I would argue it matters more now, precisely because of infinite scroll.
Really? More?
Because users scroll so fast, you have mere fractions of a second to convince them that the rest of the scroll is worth their time.
I see.
If what is above the fold doesn't immediately hook them with top-tier hierarchical importance, they won't scroll down, they will swipe back. The fold has evolved from a physical boundary into a psychological threshold of judgment.
That makes perfect sense. The text also touches on cultural conditioning regarding position hierarchy. For cultures that read text from top to bottom and left to right, the visual elements placed in the absolute top left corner of a layout are virtually guaranteed to be seen first.
Right. Because our brains have been trained since kindergarten to snap our eyes to the top left corner to begin processing information. It is deeply ingrained muscle memory.
So placing a logo or a key navigation button in that top left position grants it an inherent built-in hierarchy without needing to make it massive or bright red.
It's free real estate for importance.
The text also notes the power of the center. The absolute center of a layout is the bullseye of human attention. Elements placed perfectly in the center naturally command more focus than elements pushed to the periphery.
Yeah.
But beyond macrogeography, top, bottom, left, right, there is a micro level to position, which the text defines as alignment hierarchy.
Yes, this is about how elements are organized in relation to one another, rather than their relation to the page as a whole.
The text gives a great example of how incredibly subtle yet powerful this can be. Imagine a simple list of text, or a vertical stack of geometric shapes.
Okay, a list.
By doing nothing more than taking the bottom 3 items on that list and indenting them slightly to the right, the designer instantly creates a hierarchical subcategory.
They create a sophisticated sense of order.
You didn't have to make the indented text smaller. You didn't have to change its color to gray. You didn't have to put a box around it.
Just a slight nudge.
Just shifting its spatial alignment on the x-axis tells the viewer's brain these 3 indented items are subservient to or contained within the item directly above them.
Which serves as the perfect bridge to our third major principle. Alignment isn't just a trick for creating subcategories. Alignment is the foundational structural glue that holds the entire visual composition together and prevents it from collapsing into chaos.
Alignment is defined here as the intentional arrangement of visual elements to create a cohesive, organized, and structurally sound composition.
Structural soundness is key.
And the author shares 2 anecdotes to hammer this concept home. The first is a reference to a legendary design educator, Robin Williams.
Not the comedian, though.
Right, not the comedian, but the author of the Non-Designer's Design Book. The source text highlights her famous, highly memorable acronym, CROP.
Yes. CR problem.
Contrast, repetition, alignment, proximity. The text asserts that understanding just those 4 foundational principles gets almost any visual problem headed in the right direction.
It is the ultimate diagnostic checklist. If a design feels wrong, it is almost certainly failing one of the CRO principles.
But the second anecdote, this is the one that really sticks with me because it is so incredibly vivid and a little bit humiliating.
It's a tough story.
It really is. The author shares a painfully funny memory from their second year of college studying graphic design. They pinned a layout up on the critique wall for the entire class to review.
The dreaded critique wall.
Right. And the instructor steps up and challenges them on the specific placement of a single element on the page. Why is this image exactly here?
And the author freezes.
Totally freezes. They admit they didn't have a logical explanation. They just put it there because there was an empty spot.
Oh, no.
So the instructor looks them dead in the eye in front of the whole class and asks, "Did you just flick a booger at your monitor and decide that's where you should put it?"
It's a brutal, visceral critique.
Oh my gosh, that's brutal.
Yeah, I mean, it's a harsh way to learn, but the author admits it permanently burned the core philosophy of alignment into their brain.
I want to spend some real time dissecting the profound philosophical truth hiding behind that gross college memory, because it encapsulates the most important lesson of everything we've talked about so far.
The core truth the instructor was attacking is the concept of intentionality.
Intentionality.
What the student was doing, what so many novices do, was spending hours crafting beautiful individual elements. They chose a lovely font, they edited a gorgeous photograph, they picked a great color palette.
The pieces were good.
Right, but then they placed those beautiful elements onto the canvas completely arbitrarily. They were just dropping things wherever space allowed, floating them in the void.
Licking them at the monitor.
Exactly. But alignment dictates that nothing, absolutely nothing, can be placed randomly. Every single item on a page, every block of copy, every photograph, every microscopic dividing line must have a geometric, intentional, mathematical relationship to something else on that page.
Everything connects.
You align the sharp left edge of a photograph precisely with the invisible vertical line created by the text block below it. You align the mathematical center of a headline perfectly with the center axis of the page.
Why is that rigid mathematical relationship so important to the human eye? Why do we care?
Because that alignment creates an invisible grid. It creates structural integrity. When visual elements are aligned to one another, the human brain subconsciously perceives them as connected, as part of a deliberate, unified system.
The brain recognizes the underlying geometry and relaxes.
Yes. When elements are slightly unaligned, when a photo is floating a quarter inch to the left of the text for absolutely no reason, the brain perceives chaos, error, and instability.
It's the difference between a massive pile of bricks randomly dumped onto a front lawn and those exact same bricks carefully, intentionally stacked with mortar to build a towering wall.
That's a perfect visual.
The individual bricks are identical in both scenarios. The alignment is what creates the structure. The invisible grid ensures elements are positioned consistently, which contributes to the overarching balance and trust in the design.
Trust is the key word there.
Right. If the alignment is sloppy, the viewer subconsciously assumes the information itself is sloppy and untrustworthy.
And that concept of structural balance leads us seamlessly to the final, and perhaps most poetic, principle in this chapter.
I know where we're going with this.
We have spent this entire deep dive obsessing over where to put things. We've talked about how to make elements move, how to manipulate their visual weight, how to stretch their size to trick the eye, and how to lock them into an invisible geometric grid.
We've covered a lot.
But what about the places on the canvas where we intentionally put absolutely nothing?
The sound of silence. The source text introduces the vital concept of white space, which is also commonly referred to in the industry as negative space.
Negative space, yes.
And I think the author makes a brilliant practical clarification right out of the gate here. White space does not actually have to be the color white.
A critical point. The term white space is a holdover from the days of printing on literal white paper. But in modern design, negative space can be a cavernous, solid black background.
It can be a massive expanse of blurry blue sky in a photograph.
It could even be a very subtle, low-contrast repeating pattern. The literal color or texture is completely irrelevant.
What matters is the perception of emptiness. White space is defined as the intentional active space placed between, around, and sometimes within the tangible visual elements in a design solution.
But this raises an important question, especially for those of us who feel pressure to maximize the value of the real estate we are designing for.
The clients always want to fill the space.
Oh, always. What does emptiness actually do? If I'm paying $1,000 for a magazine ad, or I have a boss demanding that all the product features fit on one PowerPoint slide, why on earth would I want to leave 40% of the canvas completely blank?
Make the logo bigger.
Exactly. Why is a lack of content considered a foundational, powerful principle of design?
It's a great question, and the text gives us 3 very specific psychological answers to justify the power of nothingness. First, white space provides what the author calls visual rest.
Visual rest, I love that.
I adore that term. We talked earlier about cognitive fatigue and the eye bouncing randomly like a pinball. If every square millimeter of a composition is crammed with text, bold graphics, and heavy borders, the eye is under constant assault.
It never gets a break.
It never gets a break. White space is the pause between the notes in a complex piece of music.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Without the silence between the notes, a symphony is just a wall of deafening noise. The visual emptiness allows the viewer's brain to momentarily pause, digest, and process the heavy piece of information they just looked at before forcing them to move on to the next one.
It regulates the breathing rate of the design.
Second, the text explains that white space actively creates emphasis. It isolates and elevates important elements. Think about a diamond ring displayed in a high-end jewelry store.
Okay, picture it.
They don't dump 50 diamond rings into a chaotic bin like they're on sale at a flea market.
No, definitely not.
They place one single ring on a tiny velvet pedestal inside a large, mostly empty glass case.
Yes.
The physical empty space surrounding the ring screams to your brain, this object is singular, important, and highly valuable.
The space elevates the object.
In design, if you take a tiny 1-inch corporate logo and place it in the dead center of a massive, stark, empty page, you are weaponizing emptiness. You are forcing the viewer to look at it. The negative space acts as an amplifier, exponentially increasing the visual weight of whatever it surrounds.
And third, white space achieves overarching structural balance. It ensures that no single quadrant of the composition feels too heavy, dense, or claustrophobic. It provides the counterweight to your visually heavy elements.
So what does this all mean for us, not just as designers, but as everyday consumers navigating a world flooded with visual information?
It changes how we see the world.
The text makes an absolutely fascinating extrapolation here, connecting the concept of empty space directly to human sociological and psychological perception.
This is the best part.
The author states, generous amounts of white space can be used to help create a sense of luxury or exclusivity, and minimalist design solutions with lots of white space are often perceived as modern or cutting edge.
This is where we cross the line from graphic design into profound, psychological manipulation, and brand conditioning.
Let's explore that. Think about the digital storefront of an ultra-high-end luxury brand, like a Swiss watchmaker that sells $50,000 timepieces, or an avant-garde Parisian fashion house.
Okay, I'm imagining it.
If you go to their website, what are you greeted with? It is almost certainly a massive, intimidating expanse of empty space.
Usually stark white or deep black.
Right. There might be one stunning, highly controlled photograph of a watch sitting perfectly in the center, surrounded by an ocean of nothingness, and maybe 3 words of elegant, microscopic typography at the bottom.
It's so quiet.
The generous, almost aggressive use of white space communicates supreme confidence. It subconsciously whispers to the viewer, "We are so established, so wealthy, and our product is so undeniably superior that we do not need to scream at you with 50 different sales pitches."
We don't need flashing buttons.
Our product speaks for itself in the silence. It feels intimidatingly luxurious. It feels deeply exclusive.
Now, mentally contrast that luxurious silent website with a discount grocery store flyer that gets shoved into your physical mailbox every Tuesday.
Oh, it is the exact opposite end of the
It
spectrum.
really is.
A chaotic discount grocery flyer utilizes literally 0 empty space.
Yeah.
Every single available millimeter of the paper is violently crammed with jagged, bright yellow burst graphics,
Massive overlapping red prices.
aggressive exclamation points, and deeply cropped photos of cereal boxes, toilet paper, and ground beef overlapping each other in a chaotic collage.
And why do they do that? Do the designers of the grocery flyer just not know about white space?
They failed the class.
No. They do it because the complete, suffocating lack of white space communicates a completely different, highly intentional psychological message.
It communicates frenzy.
It communicates urgency. It yells, "Look at the sheer, overwhelming volume of value we are packing into this one single piece of paper." You don't have time to rest your eyes. You have to get to the store now before these incredible deals disappear.
It's mind-blowing when you truly think about it. You could take the exact same photograph of a basic wristwatch. If you shrink it down and surround it with massive margins of perfectly balanced white space, the viewer's brain will assume it costs $1,000.
Immediately.
If you blow that exact same photo up, tilt it, overlap it with a giant neon starburst, and cram it next to 5 other products with 0 white space, the viewer's brain will assume it costs $12.
The product didn't change.
The pixels of the watch didn't change. The invisible, empty space surrounding the product entirely dictated its perceived financial and emotional value.
The emptiness dictates the feeling. The space itself is the message.
All right, let's take a breath and synthesize this incredible, multi-layered journey we've been on. We have completely deconstructed the 4 final principles of design from Chapter 8.
It's been a ride.
Movement is not animation. It is the invisible, carefully orchestrated pathway that guides the eye, prevents cognitive fatigue, and seamlessly connects the dots of your narrative.
Hierarchy is the complex architecture of importance.
Utilizing the optical illusions of visual weight, the manipulation of perceived size, and the geography of position to subconsciously tell the eye what actually matters.
Alignment is the structural mathematical glue.
Ensuring every element has an intentional relationship, keeping the journey organized and trustworthy. And white space, or negative space, is the powerful sound of silence, giving the eye necessary room to breathe, creating aggressive emphasis, and subconsciously dictating the emotional tone and perceived value of the entire piece.
And returning to the overarching philosophy we discussed at the very start of this deep dive, all 4 of these distinct principles ultimately serve one master.
They serve the designer's pursuit of total, uncompromising control over the audience's psychological and visual experience. Before we close out, I want to take one more opportunity to directly ask you, the listener, to support the channel.
Please do.
If you appreciate these intense, highly detailed deep dives into the mechanics of the world around us, if you find value in uncovering the invisible rules that govern everything from the software interfaces on your phone to the massive billboards on your highway, please support us.
We do not do surface-level summaries here.
We want to rip these concepts apart to understand the why and the how. Your support is the engine that allows us to keep analyzing, decoding, and sharing this level of knowledge with you. There are links in the description to help keep this deep dive going.
And as we finally wrap up today's exploration, I want to leave you with a lingering, somewhat provocative thought.
Ooh, leave us with something to chew on.
We've just spent this entire deep dive analyzing the mechanics directly from the source material. We've seen, in stark detail, how graphic designers and art directors have meticulously mapped out the exact psychological and biological triggers needed to control our eye movement.
It's scary accurate.
We've explored how they weaponize implied lines to make us look exactly where they want, how they manipulate geometry to trick our perception of what is important, and how they make us feel a deep sense of luxury or a frantic sense of urgency just by adjusting the empty, invisible space on a page.
They have it locked down to an absolute science. It is an applied psychology.
They really do.
Yeah.
So, if these tools are so incredibly effective and so universally deployed,
Yeah.
how much of our daily visual experience is actively manipulating our attention without us even realizing it?
That is a heavy question.
When you unlock your phone and open your favorite social media app, are you genuinely choosing what to look at? Or has the designer already chosen for you, building invisible bumpers and utilizing visual weight to drag your retina exactly to the content that keeps you addicted? And by learning these foundational principles today, are we simply learning how to design better PowerPoint presentations and marketing layouts? Or are we actually learning how to spot the invisible hand?
Are we reaching up to it?
Are we learning the rules of the game so we can reclaim our own visual autonomy in an incredibly noisy, manipulative world? Keep your eyes open.
I promise you, the next time you look up at a chaotic digital billboard, or you open a confusing, frustrating new app, you won't just see a random mess anymore.
You'll see the matrix.
You'll see the exact structural failures, you'll see what the designer failed to do, and the next time you effortlessly, joyfully navigate a beautiful, intuitive screen, you'll know exactly how they secretly guided you there. Thanks for taking the deep dive. We'll see you next time.